Welcome to another episode of Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patti Casper. This podcast is for those who are living with the effects of prenatal exposure to alcohol, their loved ones, and anyone else wanting to learn more about fetal alcohol spectrum disorders. Each week, you'll hear from someone whose expertise is either professional or living experience with FASD. I'm your host, Patti Casper, bringing you both. Now let's get started with another candid conversation. Gina, welcome back to Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patti Casper. It has been, about almost 2 years since you were on the show?
Yes.
Season one of my first interviews.
Yes.
I think you were episode 3 or 4 or something like that. So, and then you came back on after that conference in New Orleans, you came on with Emily. And that was a marvelous episode too, for if people want to go back and listen to those. In fact, I think I will.
Great.
So what's been going on with you? You're still up in Alaska. You're still active with the state agency up there on FASD, right?
The Alaska Center for FASD. I'm on the board. I'm the vice president. And I also just got back from Juneau. I took a complex trauma training class. That was very interesting and very helpful.
Yeah.
And I am still working at UAA, Center for Human Development, and still staging and still doing nails and still doing my other jobs. So I'm keeping busy. It's been good though.
All right. So you're not in Juneau. Which city are you living in?
I'm in Anchorage. I live in Anchorage. Juneau is where I went last week.
Gotcha. Okay.
Yes.
I know Juneau's the state capital.
Yes, it is.
And I'm trying to picture it. It was in my mind's eye, visualizing a map. Juneau is kind of in the southeast, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Kind of.
Anchorage, southwest?
Southwest.
Okay. So I'm glad you're keeping busy. You've been up in Juneau before too. You
Yes.
did some advocacy. Was that back in September you went up there to advocate for FASD?
Yes. I go every year. I've gone for the past 3 years anyway.
Okay.
Yeah,
As
I
part
enjoy that.
of the Awareness Month activities?
No, for lobbying, we go there to lobby and to just help people to understand and try to reduce the stigma around FASD.
Mm-hmm.
And sharing our stories with them has been real meaningful.
Okay. And what has that reception been like?
It's been great. People have been very receptive and they've looked forward to seeing us. Okay. It's been fun to get to know them, and they recognize me from the year before. Nice. And have to change up my story a little bit, so it's interesting. But everybody was really welcoming, and yeah, it's been a good time. I enjoy it a lot.
Okay. So that's part of your activities as a board member, yes?
No, I actually went down for myself. I went to represent myself, because when you're talking, you're not really allowed to. I'm kind of not allowed to talk about certain things because of UAA, and then I've got certain things about FASD. Mm-hmm. So when I go down there, I'm representing myself.
Okay. All right. Makes good sense. That way you're not worrying about crossing anybody's boundaries.
No, okay. Definitely not.
All right. So tell me what is going on with the center.
Well, we got the movie out, showed it around the state. That was really fun. I got to go around Nome and Wasilla, Alaska, Nome, Alaska, Juneau, Alaska. I got to go 6 places in the state and show the film. And that was really fun. I enjoyed doing that a lot. I look forward to doing that some more, actually.
Yeah. Had you been to those other cities before?
No, I'd never been to Nome, and that was super fun. Okay. But I've been to Wasilla and Soldotna, and I didn't make it to the Fairbanks. I didn't go to that one, but I got to show all the rest of them.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So how was that movie received in those communities?
Fabulous. We even had from Wasilla, we got an invitation to go to Chickaloon, Alaska, which is a little town outside of Anchorage, outside of Wasilla, out kind of out of town. In
Finally,
the
one I have never heard before.
Chickaloon. Yeah, it's a cool name. We got to show it out there. I actually wasn't there for that showing either, though. I was out of town.
Okay. Well, I feel like I'm like trying to pull information from you. So what about that process and that video movie making do you want to talk about? I know we've talked about it before, but that was like 2 years ago.
Right. Lots has happened. Well, I want to see it shown wider, a broader audience. I think that it has a lot of meaning behind it, and I think it'll help people to see us differently. And that's what I'm hoping for.
So why don't, there are many more people listening to the podcast now than back in my very first weeks. Can you share about what that movie is, how it came to be?
Sure. It's a movie that the Alaska Center for FASD put out. Dan Redfield was the he directed it and he actually made the film. We helped produce it as individuals with FASD. There were 7 of us in the movie that we came together and discussed what questions we would ask and how we would go about that. And it's 8 strategies and ways to help people with FASD. And so I find it gives hope to people that are living with it or people that are caring for people with it because it helps them to see that we're all on a spectrum, right? So it's different for everybody. If you meet someone with FASD, it means you've met someone with FASD. Doesn't mean you understand FASD. I mean, you may try, but we're all different. So I think that it's been really beneficial to get the word out there to kind of reduce that stigma. Like I said, that's my hope.
Okay.
Yeah.
And the feedback that you've gotten from audiences across the state, has that confirmed that your mission was accomplished?
Absolutely. It's been real positive. And yeah, it's been good discussions have started from it. And it's been one of those things that the more you do it, the more people you reach and the more effect you have on people. And I'm excited about that. I'm excited that people will see us as individuals that have a different learning ability, you know?
Okay.
How about you? How have you been? You've been busy.
Oh,
Lots of change for you.
lots of change.
Since I'm popping by for a sip.
Yeah, I know. We can raise the virtual glass, right? And have a cup of
Yes.
coffee together.
Yes.
Although it's what, 2:30 in the afternoon, so a little late for coffee. I don't usually do caffeine after 11 in the morning because I don't want to have trouble sleeping. But yeah, lots and lots of change. So the last podcast recording that I had done prior to earlier this week was back in August, I think early August. And I ran out, I had several episodes in the bank and they ran out by the end of September. And by that time, my office had been packed up, ready to move. We had known for a year my husband would be transferred to North Dakota, but the company just never said when. And all of a sudden it was, can you go this weekend? So my husband had been living in a hotel up here since October 6th. And I got the house packed up. We worked really hard in September to get things packed. So my office got packed up. Couldn't do any more podcast recording, couldn't work anymore on my book. Everything just kind of ground to a halt. But we finally have my office packed, unpacked and put together. Although I still need to get my printers hooked up. But I can start recording again. I can start working on my book again. And in fact, This episode will be aired on the first Monday of March. So, which I want to say is the 3rd. And by then, Sip by Sip second edition should be available on Amazon. We've given ourselves a deadline of this coming Friday to get it up, which is February 28th. We will have it loaded. I will have the first edition taken down and the second edition put up, and it's expanded. So there are 3 additional interviews than had been in the first edition. The research has been updated throughout the more factual chapters, like about FASD. That chapter is twice as long as it had been. And then there's also updated research filtered through my story, because I talk about a lot of the symptomatology in the sharing of my story. And then I added a chapter called A Call to Action for Researchers, because there are 2 areas where FASD researchers, I believe, need to team up with researchers for other conditions. Type 1 diabetes, which I think I'm very convinced caused my diabetes, and may well be a causative factor for many others. For those who were diagnosed very, very young, like I had been. And then also, I think it is not just a coincidental kind of relationship with Lewy body dementia. The ALC change makers did just phenomenal data finding with their 2 surveys, but that first one with the 428 comorbid conditions, they found that there's a 206 increased likelihood of early onset diagnosis of dementia, but didn't specify which type of dementia. That was kind of beyond the scope of what they were looking at. And I think for those who maybe don't understand a whole lot about dementia, just like most of the world doesn't understand a whole lot about FASD, that may not have seemed important. But I very much believe that there is a significant relationship between these 2 conditions, and which really underscores the importance of prevention. But it's a matter. I'm not a researcher though, and so while I can have these theories, but I'm really in this book throwing out the challenge to the professionals to pick these threads up and run with them, because both conditions are enormously prevalent and growing. And so any dollars invested into prevention of FASD, I believe, will also reduce the prevalence of these other conditions as well. So that's another feature that's new. And of course, the resource list is updated, because the minute you go to print, it's already out of date, because new things are coming up all the time. For instance, Emily Hargrove is one of the chapters, one of the interviews from the first edition. And since that time, even though it was only 2 years ago when I started the book project, she's now a doctor of psychology. She has her PhD. So congratulations, Emily.
Yes, Emily, we're very proud of her.
Oh, yes. So there are changes with others as well. And of course, several of the people have become members of the ALC, Adult Leadership Collaboration of the FASD Changemakers, since I started the book project. So good things are happening for many of us.
Yes. Oh. Yes. I joined, goodness, I think I had kind of joined right after the interview, I think is what happened with the ALC.
Yeah.
And I'll get to see a couple of them at the conference in Seattle which is
Yeah.
coming up, which is very exciting. Sorry you can't be there because
I
there's going to be
know. I
lots of
wish I
researchers
could.
there. I
I wish
know.
I could. I just can't. I can't go anywhere as long as I'm still caring for my mom.
Right.
Moving is hard for anyone with dementia,
Absolutely.
and particularly with Lewy body, it is extremely disruptive. One of the issues that, and that's one of the similarities is trouble with memory, right? Which is the kind of in practical terms is the definition of dementia is problems with memory. But there's also a region of the brain that has maps, right? That it has like a photographic map. Whoops, almost knocked over my mic. It maintains the photograph of what things look like. And oftentimes there's a lot of confusion when someone walks into a room, but their mind has pulled up a map, for instance, of their childhood home. So there's a lot of disorientation and confusion with that. So I expected there to be some significant issues for her with this move to North Dakota. And indeed, we've been here 3 months now, and she's just now saying things like, we're in North Dakota now. It's taken a while for that to get locked in, that we're not in California anymore. So,
Well, I commend you for being able to take care of your mother like that. It's a big job, and you're blessed to have her and to go through this new chapter in your life. I'm excited for you.
thank you. Yeah,
Done some great things for FASD.
I'm really looking forward to being able to participate at the Seattle conference in the future at some point. And of course, I'm still getting invitations from relatively new organizations. I'm trying to put conferences together that it hasn't worked out for me to participate in.
Not yet. Yet. You will.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I was supposed to deliver a keynote address in September, conference that was going to be and I think it was going to be somewhere in Asia. I can't even remember at this point. Yeah, but they gave me a link that went nowhere. So I was slated to do the address right after lunch on the first day, and my link didn't work, which
Oh,
was
darn.
very disappointing. Very
I
disappointing.
hate that when that happens. Technology is not my friend some days. I do
Yeah,
struggle with that quite a bit.
yeah. It either helps or makes your life totally miserable. So
Or it makes it miserable until you get it, and then you're okay.
yeah, yeah. It kind of makes me think of when my husband and I got into for a while, our leisure time was riding a tandem bicycle. One of those two-seater road bikes. And the owner of the sports store that we got it from said, this bicycle will take you in your marriage wherever you're already going. It will either build up and enhance your teamwork, or it will speed up your divorce. And yeah, we're still together, but we're no longer riding the bicycle. It was good. We did about 100 miles a week. And but he really prefers mountain bikes, and that's way outside my comfort zone. And yeah, so he didn't want to be on a road anymore. It was boring to him. But that's because he had all the responsibility, right? He had to navigate between potholes and this, that, and the other thing. I just had to hang on and have fun, look around. I had to pedal, but yeah, I didn't have the responsibility. I was just along for the ride. So
I like bike riding. I have a fat tire bike that I like to ride. It's
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
Yeah.
he's thinking about getting something like that for here because he's never had to deal with snow before. So yeah. Yeah. So what else is going on with you? What's going on at the university?
Well, I'm winding down. I'm on a grant, and that grant runs out in June, so I'm not sure whether or not I'll still be working there or not.
Okay.
But I got to help with a public health workforce survey to find out why more people with disabilities don't apply for the health field in the college. And
Okay.
so it's been interesting. We did focus groups, we did the survey, we did the recommendations that we're getting ready to share now.
Mhm.
That's really exciting. And it was very meaningful for me to meet with the focus groups because I realized that a lot of what they were saying were things that I had to get recommendations for my son when he had needed an IEP. And I didn't know what a recommendation was. And so I had to fight for him to have services being dyslexic in the public schools.
Mhm.
And that meeting with the focus groups was really meaningful for me because some of the things that they were complaining about were things that they used to get in high school and now they don't get it in college and it doesn't follow with them.
And things that they missed.
Yes.
Yeah. What can you share a little bit about what some of those accommodations had been that they had found to be so helpful?
Sure. They were kind of recommending some and then they were letting us know that the ones that they had in place were working. The ones that really stand out for me are a girl in a wheelchair couldn't reach the tables in the lab tables because they were too tall. And she was upset. She didn't want to put the teacher out. She didn't want to inconvenience the teacher to have to get her a new desk. Um, that same person was locked out of the building every week to go to class in a wheelchair because they kept that door locked. And so those little things may seem like not much, but they add up. And when you're dealing with that stuff day in and day out, it's really tricky. Quite a few people had anxiety issues and depression, and they are considered disabilities now. So they do get extra time on tests and they get to wear headphones if they need to, or they get to have extra time. And those are things that all of them agreed that they really like to have. It was real interesting because some people were talking about not being able to get the accommodations because they wouldn't work for them when they were in the workplace, right? So that if the college gives them those accommodations and then they get into the workplace and you can't use those accommodations, it's really doing them a disservice. So I think it was important to discuss that.
Okay. Like this is where the rubber meets the road and you learn how to adapt without official accommodations
Right.
because
Absolutely.
the real world,
The real world
right?
is not going to give
Kind
you
of
extra
like,
time.
so many of us have grown up with one very supportive parent, one parent perhaps that's saying they've got to be able to function in the real world, except we're all in the real world, right? And that's the people that have paved the way and gotten some accommodations to be very standard, like the crosswalk, the audible crosswalk signals, or the wheelchair buttons that open the doors, and curb cuts with the ramps. Those trailblazers had to pave that way.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah,
Absolutely.
accommodations it's not about the real world. It's about
No.
supporting people with their unique needs and strengths.
Right. Right. Well, and that's what we're hoping that the faculty and other students will take interest in this and realize the things that may seem minimal to you, they can really mean a lot as to whether or not these people make it through because they're traditional and non-traditional students
Yeah,
and that took the survey. And
yeah,
so it was interesting to see how much better it had gotten the DSS, Disability Services, that they finally realize that it's there and that they can ask for accommodations. And that made me happy because years ago, it wasn't like that. They didn't know about disability services and they didn't know that they could get accommodations unless they had a real disability. Then they thought they had to be something more severe than anxiety or depression.
Yeah.
So,
Now, for those who are listening to the podcast as opposed to watching it, you could insert the eye roll with the
absolutely. Yes.
real disability, right? And the air
Yes.
quotes around the
The air
word real.
quotes. Yes.
And we are also different in so many ways. I'm kind of chuckling to myself as I was listening to you, thinking about the lab tables being too short
Too
for
tall.
that one young woman who was chair-bound. In my home, it's a dream home in so many ways. The person who was putting our master bathroom together, I'm guessing, was very tall because it's one of those shower heads where part of it stays up on the wall, but there's a magnet where you can take down the part that's on the hose.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And then there's a little toggle switch up on the shower head, next to the shower head, up, that stays on the wall. I'm too short.
Mm-hmm.
I can't reach it. I can't even touch it,
Right.
let alone grab on and make it move.
Right.
And so I don't get to enjoy it the way my husband does. He's so much taller than me. He loves it. He thinks it's
Yeah.
great. And I'm thinking, oh, I'm so height challenged.
Yes. It is a challenge.
Oh my goodness. All right. So what else is going on with you?
Well, I'm busy. I'm dog sitting and cat sitting for my daughter and my son-in-law and my grandsons. They're
And
12 and
they live
15
in the
now.
same town?
They do. So
Nice.
I'm here for a month. My daughter went to Guatemala and Costa Rica to do some training. She's a
Okay.
yoga instructor. She owns a yoga studio, and she's also learning doula and helping people have babies at
Mhm.
home. So
Mhm.
that's exciting.
Okay.
My son Gabriel just turned, he'll be 19 next month. So he's working away. He is going to be a plumber. He's in an apprentice program right now and doing really well there. Just got a new grand dog named Trapper, a little golden lab, 10 weeks old. That was a little frustrating having to maneuver that because I know it's a lot of responsibility for my boy, but you can't tell them what to do. You kind of got to let them figure it out on their own and learn
Yeah.
the huge
And
responsibility of getting a puppy.
that's a challenge parenting, right? Because it's a natural instinct to want to make things easy and be helpful, but if we try and overprotect or over cushion things for our kids, we're really setting them up to fail.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I say all that at the risk of thinking of the real world.
Exactly. It is the real world. There's air quotes again.
Yep. Yeah. All
Yeah.
right. So, what do you have any FASD projects coming up, Gina?
The only thing that well, I'm still working on the survey and doing the recommendations. I have a presentation for the College of Health to tell them about our recommendations for the survey. And then I go to Seattle and I'm hoping to make it to Hawaii this year. I only got to go one time last year and it was kind of hard because it was for a concert in June, so I didn't get to really enjoy it. It
Yeah.
was a Toby Mac concert. That was super fun.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm doing well. I'm keeping busy and
Mhm.
I feel good. I've done over 700 homes to date.
That's
I'm
wonderful.
staging homes, if people
How
don't know.
long have you been doing that?
This is my 12th year, 12 years.
You are keeping busy. That's a lot
Yeah,
of,
it's a lot of homes.
yeah.
So I can still do nails. I've done nails for 5 years or 20 years, and I have 30 years, I'm sorry, and I've got 5 clients left.
You don't look old enough to be doing nails for
Thank
30
you.
years.
Thank you. I'll be 60 this year. I'm very excited about it. I'm going to shout it from the rooftops. I don't mind at
I
all.
I have enjoyed my 60s so far.
I'm
Yeah.
excited about it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
40s were fabulous.
Mhm.
50s, yeah, they weren't so nifty. My body started really falling apart.
Yeah,
But the 60s I have enjoyed.
good. So that gives me something to look forward to.
Yeah. And I'm really thinking about everything that I'm doing in the FASD space at this point as legacy work.
Mhm.
I'm really wanting to pass on all these conversations that I've been having in some form to the up and coming generation. Those of us with FASD who are in our 20s and 30s, even 40s, to have, to be able to pick things up and run with them even further, to take it the next umpteen yards down the field. I remember having on a guest, I can see her face and I can't pull her name from my head. Oh, I hope she forgives me. She's a research director down at UC Irvine. And she made the comment in the episode that the directors of a lot of these departments that do engage in FASD research, they shape how things are defined
Oh,
to what can be, what does FASD look like? What are the parameters we should have in place in really defining things? And those definitions so far have tended to be old school, like based on FAS as opposed
right.
to FASD. And that being very problematic because it doesn't reflect the broad spectrum of effects that we see with FASD. And being rooted in those early years focuses a lot on the people, the subjects at that time
Mhm.
were people who did not have appropriate supports in place.
Right.
So their outcomes, and their living situations were far worse than what most of us experience all the time.
Absolutely.
I kind of think that one thing we need to really be focusing on, and maybe from your work UA, you might agree with this, or maybe you can refine what I'm about to say a little bit more. I'm thinking we really need to be more mindful about where is that fine line between, with our identity, between making people aware of our challenges and our struggles and the disability side, fetal alcohol spectrum disorders, and the self-affirming, hopeful side of really playing up our strengths, right? Because accommodations that aren't based on our strengths are just doomed to fail.
Absolutely.
But there's a fine line there, and I think we need to get so much better at figuring out where that line is.
Absolutely. And the people, the Deb Evansons and the Marilyn Pierce Bolgers and the Michael Jeffries, the people that are paving the way, it's really helpful to know what they've seen throughout these years, trying to help us see what accommodations would be helpful for us. Because I know getting diagnosed at 50, I didn't know what accommodations were, but I did know that I helped my son with his IEP, so I knew a little bit more about it than I thought I did, but I didn't know how that pertained to me or what accommodations I needed. So it's been helpful for me to know that giving myself more processing time is a big one for me. My
Yeah,
memory is not good. I do struggle with the memory a lot, and I do worry about the dementia factor of that because my grandfather had it. But I'm plugging along, and I want to be part of the troop that, like you say, we want to help those and pave the way for those coming up
yeah,
beneath us because we won't see a lot of these changes in our lifetime
right.
that I believe. I like to be hopeful, but I'm kind of realistic when it comes to some of that. But I do think that by moving forward and having your focus be on just helping everyone. I mean, it doesn't have to be you have to be neurodivergent to need help.
Right.
We all need help. And I think that it's important for us to remember that neurodivergency has become a real important word now, and people want to make sure that everyone feels like they are included because we don't want anyone to feel left out. But I
Well,
think that
and I think that's why we flip the script and talk about neurodiversity,
yes.
because our unique combination of challenges and strengths and preferred learning methods
Mhm.
is as unique to each of us as our fingerprint is.
Absolutely.
So all of us have things that we don't do as naturally as somebody else or as skillfully, and that's okay.
Just
That
takes us a little bit longer.
yeah,
I think we can accomplish most things. It just takes us a little bit longer to get there.
yeah.
And
I mean,
patient. Mhm.
one of the things that is common to many folks with FASD is one of those ADHD traits of not finishing things that we start,
Mhm.
because we're professional squirrel chasers.
Yes, we are.
And that's part of why I have been a professional college student for a huge chunk of my life, because I kept changing my major, and almost every time I changed my major, I also changed schools and lost credits. So um, I actually, and I thought by the time I got my master's degree that I was, beyond that, but now I have three master's degrees. And when I got hired as a part-time hospice chaplain, I thought, what can help me be a better chaplain? Because two of my masters are in theology. What can help me be a better chaplain than becoming, or at least going through the training for an end of life doula? And so I only went through half of that process before I thought, okay, I've learned enough. Truthfully, I got sidetracked by coaching learning how to be a coach, right? Because I had to launch my business in the middle of all this. Just because my regular employment kind of dwindled and I had to do something, and there were too many things going on, and the doula bit got put on the shelf. But I still learned enough to really help my skill set as a chaplain. But yeah, but I still have those tendencies of chasing squirrels.
I'm not sure we're ever going to outgrow that.
I'm beginning to think not. I mean, if I'm 61 and I'm still a squirrel chaser, yeah, that just might be part of me forever. I don't know. I
That's
will
not
say that the closer we are to, well, to identifying our purpose and the mission that we're called to fulfill in life, the easier things get.
absolutely. I think I know that by getting diagnosed and doing what I've done, I feel like I've got a lot more purpose. And my faith, has gotten me through a lot of it, a lot of the things that I wasn't sure how I would handle or what I would deal with. And I think that I feel for people that don't have that don't have faith, that don't have something to lean on, because I know that that's helped me quite a bit through the troubles in my life.
And it really rooted in faith is the belief in the reality that we learn more about ourselves through struggle and hard times than we ever do when things are easy. Because when things are easy, we're just hanging on for the ride, kind of like me on the back of the tandem bicycle, you know, just enjoying everything, except when he passed gas, then that was not okay. There goes another squirrel. But we learn about ourselves. We learn about what we're really made of when we are challenged.
I
Um,
think say my trials and tribulations have taught me way more than my successes. And that's something that I know my kids get tired of hearing than when I say that. But I think it's important for them to understand that we do the best we can. And I think that that's the important part. And whether you have a disability or whether you don't know if you have a disability or if you wonder or you're curious, I think it really, if you just see yourself as a whole person and realize that we all need different help. You know, getting on to the Zoom used to take me 15 minutes because I wanted to make sure I got on, make sure I got my numbers, make sure. And now it's like I can get a link and get on Zoom within 5 minutes and I'm good, you
Yeah.
know? So
Yeah.
it's just teaching and learning and, being patient with ourselves and showing ourselves more grace. Because I
Yeah.
think that's one of the things that worries me about these younger kids coming up now is they're so hard on themselves. And with the way the social media is, and, you know, it's just, you get lost in that, right? I mean, they don't always know who they are,
Right.
and that kind of confuses them. So I like to help pave the way and give them hope that, yes, you may have a different ability, is what I like to call it, but that doesn't make you a bad person. And it doesn't mean that you're going to have to make bad choices. It is all a choice.
So just for grins and giggles, let's go down this road. Where do you stand in the whole perspective of, is it okay to think in terms of disability
Well,
versus differently abled?
yeah,
It seems like society makes mountains out of molehills when it comes to our language.
yes.
And there's definitely something to be said for words have meaning, and there are valid points to be made in terms of the nuances of the words that we use. That's very valid, but it seems like in many ways the pendulum has swung too far.
Mm. I
So
agree.
where do
I,
you come down with that?
you know, I struggle with this a little bit because, in the movie I stated I don't see it as a disability.
Mhm.
I see it as a different ability, because I don't, because I grew up not knowing I had it, I kind of have a hard time calling it a disability because it really didn't disable me from doing anything. I don't consider myself a disabled person. I just happen to have a disability. So it's a tough call. I mean, I understand people's rights and their reasons for thinking the way they think.
Mhm.
And so I don't want to ever minimize someone else's different abilities or their disabilities. I kind of would like to just be on the playing field and saying, this is the way I say it, and that's the way you say it. We can agree to disagree.
Mhm.
But I'm not trying to pass judgment on anybody for saying it that way.
Yeah, yeah. I
That's the
think we're in
important part.
wholehearted agreement on that. Because I also have type 1 diabetes. That is considered to be a disability, because I rely on accommodations to stay alive because my body does not function the way everyone else's does in terms of, my pancreas is broken. But I never considered it, I don't remember life without it. So I've never been one to say, like so many parents of newly diagnosed kids, my son has diabetes, it doesn't have him. And that all has always left me scratching my head because it, and I think that's probably a function of my age at diagnosis and my having no conscious memory of life without it. To me, it's always been a part of me, although it is not the defining part of me. And I think that's a huge distinction. But it has also given me characteristics of strength and fortitude and resilience that my peers growing up never had, never needed to have. And I think the same thing is true with the FASD. I've always had it, but I never knew it until I was 56. And one thing that is new since the last time we talked, Gina, is that I have now been officially diagnosed, NDPAE, and unofficially diagnosed with ADHD. I was remarking to a friend, and that's only because the person who gave me my diagnosis said, this is not my wheelhouse. I'm recognizing it, but it's not in my licensure to be able to diagnose ADHD. So I'm gonna shy away from that. If you need it to be official, you need to follow up and see someone else. But I remember talking to a friend of mine that I had worked with for years. And I said, yeah, I've been thinking about this the last probably year and a half, wondering if I was one of the many adult females who receive an ADHD diagnosis. She goes, are you kidding me? I've known you had it for about 8 years, ever since I met you. Once again, am I wearing my symptoms out loud? Is it obvious to others? But back to what I was starting to say, with the diabetes has for decades been considered a disability, but for me, it was never a disability until my body lost the ability to feel the symptoms of low blood sugar, which was, oh gosh, my diabetic alert dog is 12 and a half, so 14 years ago. I woke in the morning and my sugar was 32 and I had no symptoms whatsoever. Many people are already in a coma at that point. And yeah, I felt fine. And the realization hit me that had been happening more often in the previous 6 months to that than in the previous 4 decades and 5 decades. And so that's when it became a disability. The blessing of that is I got a diabetic alert dog, because at that point I had all the technology that was available and it wasn't enough. But my super sniffer, I owe my life to her, and she's now enjoying retirement now that technology has caught up and surpassed her abilities. But
That's great. Well, I'm so glad we got to visit today, because it's been a while.
yeah,
We've gotten to catch up, and it's good to just hear how you're doing, and you're making so many changes, and it's exciting. Life is exciting.
I think the takeaways for our conversation today are that, people need to recognize that neurodiversity is probably a better way of thinking about it than neurodivergence, which implies a deviation from quote unquote normal. And that's just not helpful to think in those languages. That, I think, furthers the stigma. And so we need to define for ourselves how we apply, if we accept any labels that society would hold for us.
Yes.
Such as, do we consider ourselves disabled? And like you, I think there's a big distinction between I have a disability versus I am disabled.
Right.
I think those are two very different things.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm just to me, disabled. And I've read many, there are many people who say, yes, I am disabled, and that's okay. I don't want to pass judgment on anyone. And I think we all have to define for ourselves what those nuances in language are and what they mean to each of us. Kind of bordering that language of my truth and your truth. Yeah, no, there's only one truth. As individuals, we have perspectives, not truths. We have perspectives. There's only one reality, and none of us see that clearly yet. Right? If you believe in scripture, at some point in the future, we will all see clearly. We will see what reality is. In the meantime, we have perspectives that are valid and valuable, and we need to honor them. And we need to define them for ourselves. And we need to be respectful of how other people define those things for themselves.
I like the way you worded that. That's a good way of summing it up.
Yeah. All
Yes.
right. So what goals do you have moving forward, like if we have another conversation a year from now, what do you want to have accomplished in the FASD world?
Well, I'd like to get the movie out there a little bit more. That's kind of my goal. I'm continuing work with the Alaska Center for FASD, and I'm starting a peer support. I'm going to become a peer support specialist, and we're going to have peer support groups. That's our goal to get going. It's in our deliverables for the grant.
Okay.
And yeah, I will continue to shout from the rooftops that, FASD is something that those of us that have it have learned to deal with it, hopefully. And those of us that haven't learned to deal with it yet will have hope in knowing that there's ways around it. And that's what I'm hoping that everyone gains, is that they realize, I don't know, every movie that we've shown, every time we've shown the movie, we've had questions and answers, and we've gotten lots of good questions. And so I know that the movie is serving its purpose. I just think that it needs to be broader.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thanks for asking.
Well, that's a wonderful teaser for an episode that is soon coming, because I will have Deb Evenson on, and because she was heavily involved in the making
Yes,
of
absolutely.
was it eight keys for adults with FASD? Is that
Yes.
the name of it?
Yes. And it's on YouTube now, so you can see it. It's
Yeah.
30-minute film.
Yeah.
And like I said, Dan Redfield was the one that directed it.
Mhm.
And Marilyn Pierce Bolger and Deb Evenson are the ones that actually they are the ones, it's their brainchild. They're the ones that came up with it. Jen Lutke was involved in the first movie, 10 Keys for Magic Keys for Adults. No, 10 Magic Keys for Adults, the first one. That was out years ago.
Okay. I didn't know about that one. I knew about the one for the kids.
That's it. That's 10 keys
Okay.
for kids. Yeah, it doesn't say for kids, but it's for kids.
Okay. Yeah, and that one was animated, was it not? Or mostly animated?
Yes, it was. Yeah, this one has us in it, but it's got animation as well.
Okay, so it's a hybrid. Yeah. I'm excited to have the impact of that. So Deb is going to come on, and we're actually going to show that in the podcast.
Well, how exciting. That's wonderful. You have to let me know when you're going to do that. I'd love to watch it again.
Yeah, I'm just waiting for her to schedule the recording process.
Great. Okay.
But yeah, I'm really excited to get it to another audience that way.
Thank you. I appreciate you doing that.
Well, it's I'm on YouTube, so that's not too different, but I'm also on Spotify and Patreon and Rumble. It might not have the same impact on the platforms that are audio only, like Audible and Pocket Casts.
Right.
But for Patreon, Rumble, and Spotify, it will reach that audience as well. So
Okay.
for those who, maybe might not like YouTube, it's kind of hard to think about who might that be.
Right.
My husband's always going to YouTube once he's, I need to know how to do this, and he finds tutorials. So,
okay.
Gina, thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I really appreciate it.
I enjoy my time with you.
Oh, yes, always. You'll need to let me know what is cooking at the Seattle conference. I'm very eager to hear.
I sure will.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, Gina.
Have a
Thank
fabulous
you
day.
so much for joining.
Bye, everyone. Have a
All
great day. Bye-bye.
right. Thank you for joining me for this episode of Living with FASD, Candid Conversations with Patti Casper. Feel free to send comments, questions, and topics you'd like to learn more about, hear more about, to me at livingwithfasdpodcast@gmail.com. Please remember to like, follow, and share this podcast on whatever platform you use so that more people can find the podcast. Have a blessed week, everyone, and tune in next Monday for another candid conversation on living with FASD.